Former President Donald Trump once ordered an investigation into thermostats he thought might have been responsible for hacking the election. So now this comes from ABC News reporter Jonathan Karl's upcoming book, Betrayal. Then President Trump had asked Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe to investigate the Nest smart thermostat. So, okay, so now there's a conspiracy going around, unsurprisingly from the right wing, that no, some of the elections in the building, they had the thermostats, which were hacked by the Chinese. So now that idea came from Jeffrey Clark, the acting assistant attorney general for the Justice Department's Civil Division. So now Clark believed that wireless thermostats made in China for Google by a manufacturer called Nest Labs might have been used to manipulate voting machines in Georgia. According to the report, Clark sent acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen and Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue an email in late December demanding access to the DNI's classified intel to investigate whether a smart thermostat had been used to connect a Dominion voting machine to the Chinese government. The demand was one of two urgent action items Clark had presented to Rosen and Donahue in the email. The other was an alarming proposal that the Justice Department sent a letter to Georgia baselessly claiming the state's election results were corrupt and advising the GOP-controlled legislature to replace Biden's electors with new ones. So this is bonkers. Kind of a new one. I'd never really heard of thermostats, Chinese thermostats hacking election machines before. That is a new one. Understand, that is insane. And by the way, this comes from a guy, Jeffrey Clark, who said basically no matter what, I still believe Trump, and I'm going to try to get the Justice Department to steal the election for Trump. And they're using these conspiracies. So now, where do they come up with this stuff? Well, for one, they don't understand how any of this stuff actually works. And honestly, to create a conspiracy around this, you don't actually need to understand this. So, but let me give you some details, because actually I looked into it, and this is actually pretty interesting. So now it turns out Nest is, again, Nest is a smart thermostat, okay? And so, according to security researchers, is actually one of the most secure devices that can be used in your home. Now, that said, can it be hacked? Actually, yes, but anything that's connected with the internet, to the internet, can actually be hacked. I mean, any device, if you're knowledgeable enough, can be hacked. So now, is it possible? As I said, yes. Is it simple? No. So for the case of Nest, you would likely have to have physical access to the device. So you'd have to be in the building or connected to the same network. TrapX engineering professors found that they could get control of Nest's Linux OS when the device is loading the custom software before or while booting the OS. It's at that point that the attacker can break through the device's security walls. A USB port on the device can load the attacker's custom software and would stop sending data and the message to the Nest's original services. Attackers can then receive this data if the device is under their control. So again, you would need to be there in person, at the right place, at the right time, with the right software, not get caught. Obviously, very difficult to do, but yet doable. So now there's a story back in 2019 where a hacker was able to gain access to somebody's Nest device, their camera, and through that device, get access to some of the rest of their smart home devices. So that's again, very, very rare, very difficult to do. And at the end of the day, what they had to do is change their network ID in order to stop the attack. Now, again, the problem with this particular conspiracy theory is that the voting machines are not generally hooked up to the internet. I mean, you'd be stupid to hook it up to the internet during an election. That didn't happen. So now there are some some tabulators, election tabulators, that do have modems installed. Okay, and so that's a possibility that when they get hooked up to the internet to report their results. Okay, there's a possibility that it could somehow at the right time, the right place, if they knew all this stuff. And again, very, very unlikely that they could somehow intercept the data. Is that likely? No. Did it happen? No. Multiple investigations have not uncovered any evidence that machines in Georgia especially, or anywhere else in the country, had any votes changed at all. Okay? So now, not only that, but Georgia also had 3 different hand recounts of paper ballots. All right? And so, no evidence, completely bonkers theory, right? A lot of things would have to go on simultaneously for something like this to happen. Very, very unlikely. So now, what could happen from taking control of a thermostat connected to smart devices? Maybe, just maybe, you could use it to spearfish somehow, like passwords, but that's only if you're dumb enough to have the same password for everything. But understand that like spearphishing attacks happen. Spearphishing is how they got access to the DNC servers. But again, that did not involve a thermostat. And honestly, what a thermostat hack would do would look highly unusual. For example, going back to the one example that I gave you of the person in 2019 that got hacked, well, they noticed that, for one, their heat would go up. And since there was a camera system and a microphone system, that's allowed the attacker to go and talk to these people or taunt them through their devices. Okay, so now, again, if your thermostat starts talking to you, well, that would be highly suspicious. You would think that that would make news, that people would report that, right? So if that happened during tabulation, during a contentious election, you would notice that and you would report it. And again, at a time where people were very wary of anything suspicious during an election, which, again, everybody usually is during any election, would be concerned if something weird started happening. Okay? And again, in order for this conspiracy theory to work and change the outcome of an election, it would have to have happened at many different places simultaneously, like almost simultaneously, basically, at the same time. That didn't happen. We don't have any reports of that. And so for this to be evidence of mass voter fraud, or for this to happen, I mean, we would have some signs. Okay? There would be some reports of weirdness happening, but there wasn't. So now the only thing that they can point to is, well, it took a while to count the votes. Oh, okay. You realize that you had absentee and mail-in ballots, right? Something that we already knew and said was going to happen. Hey, it's going to take a while to count the votes for all the votes to get in because you have a mail-in and absentee ballots. You know why? Because of worldwide pandemic, COVID-19. But here's the thing about conspiracies. If you have a mind that sees conspiracies, you can still somehow connect dots, even dots that aren't even there, or just random dots, random occurrences, and think, aha, knew it. It's the person at the whiteboard. It's Glenn Beck with the whiteboard. You know, it's somebody with like a bulletin board with a bunch of unrelated things pinned in. You know, that's what it is. And yet they're like, I see the things that you don't. I'm drawing connections here where you haven't drawn connections, but I'm doing that because I'm smart and you're dumb. The opposite is usually true. But understand that I bring that up because that's not going to convince any of those people that the conspiracy didn't happen. And honestly, I'm not trying to convince people. People like Trump will believe any conspiracy. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that Trump had a position of power, and so he literally sent people to investigate, wasting time and money. No evidence, no evidence. Now, for him, it's one part being gullible, another part having no understanding of how things actually work, but the biggest part of this is his ego. his ego would not allow him to accept a loss. So now he convinced himself, no, because of his ego, that I could not lose if there must have been something shady here. That thermostats, bamboo ballots, the space lasers, whatever. Something stole it from me because there's no way I could lose because I'm not a loser. That's what it is. So, again, lying and cheating to yourself, convince yourself that conspiracies are right, because your psyche is delicate. It is very, very fragile. And, I mean, that's who he is. He's fragile. Fragile. Now, one last thing. So now, I keep saying, could this happen? Could this happen? There's a possibility, yes, that elections can be hacked. Understand the more stuff that you connect to the internet, the more it's possible for malicious people to break in. So you do need to be mindful. Now, how do you do that? You use strong passwords. Use multiple authentication measures and verification features. Things like two-factor authentication and more. Okay. Don't click on things that you get in your email, like random stuff. Don't do that. So also, let me tell you a story here. So this is my first personal run-in. All right. So back when I was like 15, 16 years old, my family got our first family computer. Now, we had an old gateway, 56K modem. It shows you how old I am, right? So now, when I was using it, I found out the hard way not to click on things. Because there was, I don't know if anybody remembers MSN Messenger, okay? I remember. And using MSN Messenger, those messenger apps would have occasionally like a worm that would go through them. Not like a worm that you would treat with ivermectin, but like, you know what I'm saying? Not a physical worm. But, there was a thing that went around, and what caught me is there was a game, an alleged game that was connected to this that would come through. Like how it would work is that it would infect somebody's computer, and they would send messages to people on their friends list, right? And that message would contain a link, a download. So now what got me when I was 15 was a game called Shoot George W. Bush in the Balls. Or something, some sort of variation of that. And so I see that pop up, and I'm like, hell yeah, man, I'm coming for your balls, George W. Bush. Shoot you in the balls. Well, I clicked that, and what did I get? I got a virus. Lesson learned, all right? I didn't end up shooting George W. Bush in the balls in Roblox. Or on MSN Messenger. Or anything like that. So, but look, I'm sharing that story because it's kind of a lesson that I learned when I was younger, and not to click on things that you're not sure. Okay, so don't go to suspicious websites. Don't obviously don't share your password. Don't make your password or anything like that. All right, just be safe. Be safe. So now, I want to go here to election security for a second. So, as I mentioned, Brad Friedman, he's a writer over at the Brad blog, and he does a fantastic show, and he's a friend of the show, and he looks out for election security. So I reached out to him earlier, right? And I asked him what he thought about this story. And he says, my tweet, of course, is like, hey, what do you think about the whole thermostats hack the election for China? And I said, I think it's kind of bonkers. He responded by saying, correct, bonkers. Especially since so far there's zero evidence of computer results changing paper ballots in places where they've checked. But he added, could it actually be done? Well, that's a separate matter. So, and what I'm saying is, I think the best way to do, and he believes the best way to do our elections, is to make sure that we have hand-counted paper ballots that are counted in plain view. So I think that's important because even though we haven't had an election that has had a hacking episode, okay, other than, of course, what happened with the DNC, which was more, as I said before, spear phishing. They got the password and we're able to access the system that way and access the files, that's because we haven't had an actual, I guess, since it hasn't actually happened, it doesn't mean it can't happen in the future. And so we do need to make sure that we have better election security. And I think the best way to do that is to get rid of the voting machines and to just do hand-counted paper ballots. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.